The first time anyone noticed something wrong with the house on Cromwell Street, it was only a smell. Mrs. Elsie Graham lived 3 doors down, number 31. She was 71, widowed, and kept her front step scrubbed white every morning. On the first Tuesday of June, 1973, she came out with her bucket and stopped dead. A sweet, cloying odor drifted over the low garden walls, like meat left too long in the sun, only colder. She wrinkled her nose, looked toward number 25, and saw Frank Hale on his knees in the back garden, mixing cement in a dented wheelbarrow. He waved cheerfully, as he always did. Elsie waved back, told herself it was nothing, and went on scrubbing. But the smell came again the next week, and the week after that, always on a Tuesday, always when Frank was digging or pouring something new. Content warning: this is a dramatic retelling of one of the darkest true crime cases in British history. Murder, child abuse, domestic terror, and extreme violence. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. If you enjoy long-form stories like this, please hit like and subscribe now so you never miss the next one. And drop a comment with the case you want me to cover after this. Some names and minor details have been changed, but everything is rooted in documented events. Take a deep breath. Let's step inside the house. Number 25 was tall and narrow, one of a long row of red brick terraces built for railway workers 100 years earlier. From the street, it looked exactly like its neighbors: peeling green paint on the front door, net curtains in the windows, a child's tricycle rusting on the path. Only the garden was different. Frank was forever extending it. A new shed 1 month, a fish pond the next, then a patio of fresh concrete slabs that seemed to grow wider every spring. Inside lived Frank and Ruby Hale and their growing brood. 5 children already, another on the way. Frank was 31, stocky, always smiling, teeth a little too big for his mouth. He wore the same grease-stained denim jacket, winter and summer, and drove a white van with F. Hale and Son, General Builder, hand-painted on the side. Ruby was 19, tiny beside him, with dark hair teased high and a laugh that carried halfway down the street. People said they were lucky to have found each other so young. They had not always been lucky. Frank grew up in a village so small it barely had a name. His mother told him he was special. His father told him he was useless. At 17, he stole a motorbike, rode it too fast, and flew head first into a brick wall. 8 days unconscious. When he woke, he could not remember the crash, but he remembered everything else with a new, bright intensity, colors sharper, urges louder. The doctors said the frontal lobe damage would make him impulsive. They were right. Within a year, he had made a girl pregnant and laughed in court when they gave him probation. Ruby's childhood was worse. Her father believed the radio spoke directly to him. He punished the children for sins they hadn't committed yet. By 13, Ruby had learned that the only safe place was to be wanted. When Frank's ice cream van stopped outside the chip shop every evening, bells jangling, she heard freedom. They married in a registry office with 2 strangers for witnesses. Ruby wore a second-hand white dress 2 sizes too big. Frank wore the same denim jacket. 9 months later came the first baby, then another, then another. Money was short. Frank took any job: scrap metal, tarmacking drives, cash in hand building work. Ruby stayed home and discovered she was good at making children obey. In the spring of 1972, Frank saw the advert in the local paper. 3-story house, Cromwell Street. Needs work. Owner desperate to sell. They bought it for almost nothing. On the day they moved in, Ruby stood in the empty hallway, 8 months pregnant, and felt something settle inside her chest. Not happiness exactly. Ownership. Frank started on the cellar the first weekend. He knocked through a false wall, lined the brick with fiberglass wool for the damp, he told the neighbors, installed a heavy door with a Yale lock on the outside, ran an extension lead for a single red bulb. Ruby watched him work and felt the same thrill she used to get when her father locked the bedroom door. Only now she was her hand on the key. The children learned the rules quickly. Never go in the cellar. Never answer the door to strangers when Mummy was working. Never, ever tell. The first lodger arrived in April 1973. Linda Goff, 19, seamstress, looking for a room near the factory. She was polite, paid 2 weeks in advance, and loved babies. Ruby showed her the top floor bedroom with the sloping ceiling and the view of the cathedral spire. That night, Frank carried Linda's suitcase up the stairs and winked at Ruby over the banister. Linda lasted 5 days. On the 6th morning, her mother telephoned. Ruby answered, voice syrupy. Oh, she left suddenly, Mrs. Goff. Said something about a job in Weston-super-Mare. Left half her clothes behind. Silly girl. Mrs. Goff thanked her and hung up, uneasy but powerless. That same afternoon, Frank mixed a barrow of concrete in the back garden. The smell came again, stronger this time. Elsie Graham closed her windows and tried not to think about it. Upstairs, the children played with Linda's sewing scissors. Downstairs, Ruby hummed along to the radio while she boiled bottles. In the cellar, the new floor set smooth and gray, hiding whatever lay beneath. And on the street outside, life went on as normal. Milk bottles clinked. Dogs barked. Nobody heard a thing. But the house had started keeping its secrets, and it was very, very good at it. By the summer of 1975, the house on Cromwell Street had learned to breathe. Not the ordinary rise and fall of a family home, but something slower, deeper, like lungs filling with wet earth. At night, the floorboards settled with soft sighs. Pipes knocked once, paused, knocked again, as though testing whether anyone was safe to speak. Children woke with the feeling that someone had just left the room. Ruby told them it was only the wind. Frank told them it was only the house saying goodnight. They were both lying. The cellar door stayed locked now, a shiny new Yale, the key on a red ribbon around Ruby's neck, nestled between her breasts where no child dared reach. Down there, the red bulb glowed permanently, casting everything in the color of fresh blood. Frank had built shelves along one wall, neat rows of jam jars filled with nails, screws, and things that clinked when shaken. On the opposite wall hung coils of washing line, silver duct tape, and a leather belt with the buckle removed. In the middle of the floor stood a metal frame bed with nylon restraints at each corner. Frank called it the guest suite. Ruby called it my office. The children learned to read the house by its sounds. When the front door latch clicked twice, a client. When Ruby's heels clacked down the hallway and the cellar door opened, silence for an hour or more. When Frank's boots followed, the silence lasted longer and sometimes ended with a single, muffled thud that made the light fittings tremble. They gave the sounds names. The thud was the cupboard falling over. The long silences were Mummy having a lie down. The crying that leaked through the floorboards late at night was the radio playing sad songs. Anne Marie, the eldest, was 11 now. She had learned to count the clients by the number of pound notes Ruby stuffed into the biscuit tin above the fridge. She had learned to recognize the smell that meant a new lodger had arrived. Cheap perfume, fear, and the metallic tang of fresh hope. She had also learned that asking questions made Ruby's eyes go flat and dangerous, so she stopped asking. Instead, she listened. One Thursday in October, the listening paid off. A new girl arrived just after tea. Cara, 16, run away from Bristol, all eyeliner and bravado. Ruby greeted her with tea and biscuits, told her the top room was free for £20 a week. Cara handed over a crumpled tenner and said she'd have the rest Friday. Ruby's smile never wavered. Frank carried the suitcase again. Same wink over the banister. That night, Anne Marie lay rigid in the bunk above her little sister May. The house went through its usual routine. Front door, heels, cellar door, silence. But then something was different. The girl fought. There were thumps, a chair scraping, then Ruby's voice, sharp and furious. Hold her bloody legs. A single high scream cut off as though a hand had clamped over the mouth. Then nothing. Anne Marie waited until the house slept. She crept to the landing. The cellar door stood ajar, a slice of red light spilling up the stairs like a wound. She could hear breathing, fast and wet. Then Frank's low chuckle. Then Ruby. Tape her proper this time. I'm not having another one. Get away. Anne Marie fled back to bed, heart battering her ribs. She pulled the blanket over her head and counted until morning. Cara was never seen on Cromwell Street again. But 6 weeks later, on a bitter December evening, something extraordinary happened. The front door burst open, and Cara stumbled out into the rain. Half naked, wrists raw, eyes wild, she ran straight into the arms of a passing police constable doing his rounds. Within minutes, the street filled with blue lights. Frank and Ruby were taken to the station for questioning. The children were lined up in the living room, while social workers poked around. They found the red bulb. They found the restraints. They found rolls of tape with strands of dark hair stuck to them. They found the children's terrified faces, but they did not find a single body. Frank explained the cellar was for private marital activities. Ruby fluttered her eyelashes and said they liked role play. Nothing illegal, officer. The tapes, bedroom fun. The bruises on the children, roughhousing, kids will be kids. Cara, shaking in the interview room, said she had been held for hours, threatened with burial in the garden, but she had no proof, only bruises already fading. The duty solicitor advised caution, lack of evidence, case closed by Christmas. Frank and Ruby came home to a hero's welcome from the younger children who had missed them. That night, they celebrated with fish and chips and ice cream. Frank raised his glass of Tizer and toasted family sticking together. Ruby's eyes glittered like broken glass. The house exhaled, satisfied. It had tested the bars of its cage and found them strong. Spring came. The patio grew again. Another layer of concrete. Another secret pressed flat and smooth. Elsie Graham noticed the smell was gone for a while. She told herself it must have been a dead cat under the shed after all. But Anne Marie noticed something new. Late at night, when the house finally slept, she could hear it, faint scratching beneath her bedroom floor. Not rats, too regular, too human, like fingernails trying to find a way out. She pressed her ear to the boards and whispered, "I'm sorry." The scratching stopped, then started again, slower, as if whatever was down there had decided to wait. The house was patient. It always had been. The house on Cromwell Street had grown fat on its own darkness. 16 years of concrete, 16 years of secrets, 16 years of children learning to walk on graves without knowing it. Holly Hale was 16 now, tall, angry, and beautiful in the way that made men stare too long on the bus. She had her father's square jaw and her mother's black eyes, and she had decided she was done pretending. She told her best friend, Tracy, everything one Friday night behind the sports hall at school, about the cellar, about the clients, about the way Daddy's hands lingered when he tucked her in, even now, about the jokes he made at Sunday dinner. Eat your greens, or you'll end up under the patio like your sister. Tracy laughed at first, thought it was a sick joke. Then she saw the bruises shaped like fingerprints on Holly's upper arms and stopped laughing. Monday morning, Tracy told the school nurse. Monday afternoon, the nurse told social services. Tuesday morning, 2 plainclothes officers knocked on the green front door of number 25. Ruby answered in her dressing gown, hair in curlers, cigarette dangling. Frank was at the scrapyard. The younger kids were at school. Holly was in the kitchen eating toast, still in her nightie. The officers asked to speak to Holly alone. Ruby's smile froze. Holly looked at her mother, looked at the officers, and for one bright second, the house held its breath. Then Ruby said, "Of course, love. Go with the nice policeman," in the sweetest voice she could manage. Holly hesitated. Ruby's eyes said, "Remember what happens to girls who talk." Holly remembered. She told the officers everything was fine, just a misunderstanding. Her friend was jealous, making things up. She loved her parents, really. The officers left, embarrassed, promising to keep an eye. That night, the house punished her. Frank came home early. Ruby sent the little ones to a neighbor with a bag of sweets and strict instructions to stay until bedtime. Then the 2 of them took Holly to the cellar. They did not rush. They had done this before. When it was over, Holly lay on the metal bed, wrists tied to the frame, mouth sealed with silver tape. Frank stroked her hair and told her she was still Daddy's special girl. Ruby sat on the bottom step, smoking, watching, humming along to the radio upstairs as if nothing was happening. They left her there until Thursday. On Thursday night, Frank carried her upstairs, wrapped in an old blanket. She was lighter than he expected. The children came home from school to find the living room furniture pushed back and a roll of carpet on the floor. Frank told them Holly had run away to London to be a model. Ruby cried prettily for the neighbors. That weekend, Frank rented a concrete mixer. He worked cheerfully in the rain, whistling, while the younger ones played on the half-finished patio, jumping from slab to slab like islands. Stephen, 13 and already taller than his father, was told to help carry bags of sand. Notice the mixer sounded different this time, thicker, like it was chewing something. When the last slab was laid, Frank stood back, hands on hips, and admired his work. "Proper job," he said. Ruby brought him a cup of tea. They kissed in the drizzle like newlyweds. The patio looked perfect. Underneath, Holly stopped scratching. But the house had learned a new trick. It no longer needed the cellar for everything. Sometimes the living room was enough, and the whispers changed. They weren't coming from below anymore. They were coming from inside the walls, inside the children's heads, inside the dreams they could never quite wake from. Anne Marie, now 23 and moved out, but still visiting on Sundays, noticed it first. She stood in the kitchen, washing dishes, and felt someone standing behind her. She turned. No one there, but the air was colder, heavier, like breath on the back of her neck. She asked May, 19, and still trapped in the house, if she heard whispering too. May's eyes flicked to the patio doors. Only when I'm alone, she whispered. Only when the house talking to itself. That summer, the garden bloomed like never before. Roses thicker and redder than anyone remembered. Frank said it was the new fertilizer he'd found. Nobody asked what was in it, and the house waited, patient as ever, for the next girl who needed a room. Because some doors, once opened, never really close again. February 24th, 1994. The rain came down in sheets, turning Cromwell Street into a river of mud and headlights. Blue forensic lights pulsed against the wet brick like a heartbeat. Uniformed officers formed a silent cordon, while white-suited figures moved in slow motion across the back garden of number 25. Detective Constable Hazel Savage stood under a golf umbrella and watched the first spade break the patio. She had been here before, twice, and both times she had left empty-handed. First in 1973, after Linda Goff vanished. Again in 1992, after the girl escaped and the tapes were found. Both times the house searches. Both times nothing solid. Both times the Hales smiling and waving as the police drove away. But this time the children had talked. Heather is under the patio. 7 different kids, 7 different foster homes, all saying the same sentence in the same flat voice, like a nursery rhyme they couldn't forget. So here they were, at dawn on a Thursday, tearing up Frank Hale's pride and joy. The first slab came up easily. The second stuck. The third made a wet sucking sound as it lifted. Beneath it, wrapped in a rotting blanket, was a small human skull. Hazel felt the world tilt. Within an hour, the garden looked like a battlefield. Floodlights, generators, white tents flapping in the wind. Reporters pressed against the tape, lenses fogged with breath. Neighbors stood on doorsteps in dressing gowns, arms folded tight, afraid to speak the thought that was in every mind. How many? Frank was arrested at the scrapyard at 9:17 a.m. He came quietly, still wearing oily overalls, hands raised in mock surrender. "All right, love," he told Hazel with his crooked grin. "You've got me. Let's have a cuppa and a chat." Ruby was taken from the house at 10:05 a.m. She fought, screamed, called the officers every name she could think of. Her curlers had come out in the struggle. Wet hair stuck to her cheeks like seaweed. She kept shouting that it was all lies, that Frank had forced her, that she was the real victim here. They put them in separate interview rooms at Trinity Road Station. Frank asked for tea with 3 sugars and a custard cream. He got both. By 3 p.m., he had confessed to 3 murders. By 6 p.m., he was at 7. By midnight, he stopped counting. "I lost track after a while," he said, almost apologetic. "But if you keep digging, you'll find the rest. They're all at home." He drew little maps on the back of his statement sheets, arrows pointing to flower beds, the fish pond, under the bathroom, under the stairs. He labeled them like holiday souvenirs. Lucy, Christmas 73. Shirley, pregnant one. Holly, our girl. He insisted Ruby knew nothing. "Leave her out of it," he kept saying. "She's a good mum." Ruby, in the next room, told a different story. She cried prettily, mascara rivers down her cheeks. Frank had threatened to kill the children If she didn't help, she had been too terrified to speak. She was a prisoner in her own home. The police didn't believe either version, but they kept digging. Day 2, 4 more bodies. Day 3, 6. By the end of the week, the garden was a grid of numbered holes, each one containing the remains of a young woman carefully folded into the space a man could dig in a single night. The press called it the House of Horrors. The neighbors called it the end of the world. And still, the house gave nothing away. It stood there in the rain, windows dark, waiting for someone to apologize for the mess. On the 10th day, they found the 13th, not in the garden, in the cellar, beneath the false floor Frank had built all those years ago. A tiny skeleton, wrists still bound with washing line, mouth stuffed with cloth. The pathologist said the child had been alive when buried. Frank was told in his cell. He asked for another custard cream and said nothing. That one was an accident. Then he smiled, the same crooked smile he'd worn the day he waved at Elsie Graham over the garden wall. And somewhere, deep in the brickwork, the house finally sighed, one long, satisfied breath, as if to say, "Told you I'd keep them safe." October 1996. The demolition began at dawn. A single yellow digger rolled down Cromwell Street like a metal dinosaur. Behind it came flatbed lorries, police vans, and a crowd that stood 3 deep on both pavements. No one spoke much. They just watched. Number 25 had stood empty for 2 years. Windows boarded, graffiti scrawled across the brickwork. Murder house, God sees everything, rot in hell. Now the boards were gone. The front door hung open like a broken jaw. The first swing of the bucket took out the upstairs windows. Glass rained onto the pavement in glittering sheets. The second swing, after that, punched through the roof. Tiles slid and shattered. A child's teddy bear tumbled out and landed face down in the mud. Inside, the house fought back one last time. Plaster dust billowed out in choking clouds. Floorboards snapped like bones. Somewhere deep in the cellar, a pipework groaned and burst, sending a gush of black water across the street. People said later it looked like the house was bleeding. By lunchtime, only the front wall remained, leaning drunkenly, the green paint peeling in long strips. A workman climbed up with a sledgehammer and knocked out the final brick. The wall folded in on itself with a sigh that everyone felt in their chests. Nothing was saved. Every brick was crushed on sight. Every beam was sawn into pieces too small to become souvenirs. The rubble was loaded into lorries and driven away to a secret landfill no one would-be ghouls could never find. By dusk, there was only bare earth and a rectangle of mud where a family had once eaten breakfast, celebrated birthdays, and buried its dead. The council laid tarmac the next week, a simple footpath, 10 feet wide, running straight through where the hallway used to be. No plaque, no flowers, just a path. People started calling it the silence path because no one ever spoke when they walked it. Ruby Hale stood trial alone in the autumn of 1995. Winchester Crown Court was packed. Survivors filled the public gallery. Kara, older now, eyes still haunted. Miss A, hands shaking whenever Ruby looked her way. Anne Marie and May in the back row, holding each other like shipwreck survivors. Ruby wore a navy suit 2 sizes too big and cried on cue. She told the jury she had been Frank's prisoner for 25 years, that he had forced her to do unspeakable things, that she had lived in terror. The prosecution played the tapes, Ruby's own voice, laughing, giving instructions, counting money, Ruby's handwriting in the notebooks found under the floorboards, dates, names, payments received. The jury was out for 2 hours, guilty on all 10 counts. The judge looked down at her and said, "You are a danger from which the public must be protected for the rest of your natural life." Ruby didn't flinch. She simply turned to the gallery, found Anne Marie's eyes, and smiled the same sweet, curling smile she used to give when tucking them in at night. Anne Marie smiled back, then stood up and walked out without a word. The footpath is still there, smooth and ordinary, lined with cherry trees the council planted to heal the space. Ruby is 71, gray, heavy, still inside HMP Low Newton. Every year she applies for parole. Every year they send the same letter, application denied. Some nights the duty officers say they hear humming coming from her cell, old pop songs from the 70s, the ones she used to play while clients waited upstairs. Anne Marie changed her name, moved to Spain, wrote a book no one believed was fiction. May married, had children, wakes screaming if anyone mentions concrete. Stephen drinks too much and will not walk down that street, even in daylight. Kara, the girl who ran into the rain all those years ago, still drives past the footpath once a year on the anniversary. She parks, gets out, stands in the middle of the tarmac, and listens. Most years, there is nothing but wind in the cherry trees. But one year, just one, she swears she heard it. A faint scratching beneath her feet, not scratching this time, whispering. A girl's voice, thin as paper, saying the same words over and over. "Thank you for remembering." Kara stood there until the streetlights came on. Then she got back in her car and drove away. She has never returned. Some doors, once opened, never really close. Some houses don't need walls to keep their secrets. And some echoes just wait under the ordinary ground for the right pair of feet to walk overhead and set them free again. That was the complete retelling, The House on Cromwell Street. Thank you for staying until the very end. If this one hit hard, please smash the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. New true crime thriller drops every single week. Most important, comment below and tell me which real case I should retell next. I read every single comment, and the most requested story always goes to the top of the list. Until the next one, walk carefully on ordinary pavements. You never know what might be listening from underneath. Take care of yourselves. See you in the next story.